Well, yes, I'm Zeb Knott, Knott, and I'm now 91 years old, coming up on 92. And my association with the blues, I'd known everyone from Butch Voorhees on. And when I was being considered in 1958, the requirements were you'd be a commander and have command of a squadron. Well, in the fall of '58, I had been selected for commander, but I hadn't made it yet. So I was the bottom guy on the interview list to be skipper of the blues. As it turned out, a couple of guys were turned down by Bupers, and I was over at Glencoe, Georgia, and Sinatra called and said, beat right over to Pensacola and start flying and trying out, which I did with Ed. Ed Hawley was the leader at that time. And I flew with Ed, though I knew some of the teammates, I knew Bob Rasmussen and Herb Hunter and Jack Revis.
Yes, ma'am.
But I flew with the team, was selected. My name was submitted to Bupers, and Bupers said, fine, he's good to go. He'll make his number and become a commander early in 1959. So actually, I started leading the team as a lieutenant commander. But we had, followed the tradition at that time, we had an aerial change of command in November of 1958, which I was flying number 6. Ed Hawley was flying number 1. We did a reversal, and I pulled up in front of the diamond joined on me, Ed pulled out, and that was our change of command. The next day we had a formal change of command in our dress blues with guests. And I was sorry to see the aerial change of command go, but there was a good reason for it. Normally you don't have enough time to train the new boss to lead the team properly. So for safety reasons, it was given up. And now we just have the normal military change of command, which we'll be going to this afternoon. But anyway, I took over in 1958, went to Key West, Florida in January for winter training. And I had a diamond that had already been flying for a year with the exception of me. So winter training was fairly easy. It was just the team had to get used to me, and I had to get used to people flying that close, which we did successfully, I think. Had a great 1959 season. At the end of '59, we had a big turnover. And the major thing, we lost Bob Rasmussen as the number 4 man, Herb Hunter is number 3 wing, and Stoney Mayock is number 2. So I had 3 new guys flying behind me to start our '60 season. So we moved Jack DeWinter up from solo to fly slot. Got a new Marine, Doug McCaughey, to fly right wing, and he was an absolute jewel. And a kid from the training command from VT-23, Skip Campanella, to fly left wing. Went through our training pretty well. Went on the road, and in the middle of, in June the 13th, disaster struck. We'd just gotten back from about 2.5 weeks on the road, and the number 6 airplane was due for a major check. We landed at mid-afternoon on Monday the 12th. Number 6 went into the check that night, was ready to be test flown the next day. But the next day I was making all my courtesy calls on the commands, the admirals, and all my bosses. And I was with the CO of NAS Pensacola, and the phone, his secretary came in, Says, Captain, they need Commander Knott right away. It looks like there's a fire in their practice area. And that was exactly where Skip Campanella was testing number 6. And for whatever reason, he'd flown into the ground and had been killed. Well, that was a tragic loss. And we were reconciling that, and about noon, or shortly after noon, my number 4 guy came to me and said he had to resign. His wife could not stand the pace and the pressure, and they've been very close to Skip Campanella, so my number 4 man resigned, which meant here in the middle of June, the busiest part of the year, was just myself and our right wingman, Doug McCaughey. And some questions, I briefed Admiral Fitzhugh Lee, who was our boss, 3-star. And he wanted to know what my plans were and could I salvage anything. I got the team together and told number 6, Lieutenant Bill Rennie, how do you feel about coming up and flying left wing? And his answer, boss, that's great, I love it. So my thoughts were, good. We canceled a couple of shows and started flying, training right here in Pensacola, training our left wingman. 3 hops a day, 7 days a week. And after 20 days, we had Bill Rennie trained as a left wingman. So we went on the road without a slot man, just a 3-plane and 1 solo. In the meantime, AirPac, Commander Aviation for Pacific, had interviewed all the F-11 squadrons on the West Coast, and they had nominated a young man, a bachelor, to come join us. He joined us in July of 1960, and we trained him right here at Pensacola with my lead solo, Lieutenant John Rademacher, and went back on the road with 3-plane and 2 solos. And we had my number 7 guy, narrator, public affairs, flew the 2-seater, was Duke Vinson, now known as Duke Vinson. Then he was Duke Ventimiglia, a very popular Hollywood director and very successful, very colorful. And I spent a great time with him last night. But we flew a 3-plane division in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Detroit, Michigan. And in the meantime, I was searching for a number 4 guy, and I knew Ken Wallace from a long time back. We'd made a couple of med cruises together, and I'd known him since he was a midshipman in flight training. He was in college at the University of Mississippi, getting his degree. I called him. I said, "Ken, what do you think about coming back to the team as slot?" He said, "Fine. As soon as I get out of college, I'll join you." So we cleared this with Bupers, and they issued the orders. However, I did not talk to his wife, Harriet, and she was ready to skin me alive because Ken had already spent almost 3 years in the Blue Angels, and she thought that was enough. High risk and away from home all the time. But Ken did join us. He was sent down to Kingsville, Texas, and got checked out in the F-11 and got 15 or 20 hours, joined us here, and as we'd fly an air show, and each air show we'd do a new maneuver so Ken would get acclimated to flying number 4 again. So by the end of the year, he was trained, almost completely trained. Winter training, again in Key West, Florida, we finished training Kenny Wallace in number 4. I had Lieutenant Bill Rennie flying left wing, Doug McCoy right wing, Ken Wallace in slot, and we got 2 new solos, Lieutenant Lou Chatham and Dan McIntyre, both of whom are still with us. So we trained hard in Pensacola and started our 1961 season, which was the 50th anniversary of naval aviation, and we were scheduled to fly 85 shows, which was just unheard of.
And this was the golden
It
year.
was the 50th anniversary of naval aviation, our golden. So we said, fine. Our first show was on 13 February in Liberal, Kansas. And Kansas in February is like a big blizzard. Fortunately, we flew into Liberal, and their only approach system was something called ILS, Instrument Landing System. Well, fortunately, I had the F-11s we were equipped to fly an ILS approach. So we landed in a snowstorm. It snowed for 3 days that we were there. But we had the annual English Liberal Kansas Pancake Derby, which ladies ran down the street flipping pancakes, which is an old English tradition from Wales, I guess. Anyway, we stayed there 3 days, left for our next show the following weekend. And I've forgotten where that was right now, but we made that, and it ended up flying, I think, in 1961, all kinds of personal appearances on television all over the country, and we flew 77 shows.
And also, I remember reading that you made 2 out of the country
Yes, we did.
experiences in Bermuda and Toronto. Right.
Canada
Yeah.
and Bermuda, and Bermuda's a long story. In 1959, we'd flown for the Queen of England up in Milwaukee when they were opening the All-American Canal. The Queen, there's a word for it that escapes me right now, but we got to meet the Queen and Prince Charles, and they liked us. We flew an air show for them over the water, over Great Lakes in Milwaukee, and we finished that, back on the road again, and in about June, I guess, of '61, the Queen had her Prime Minister, who, this was just after Churchill, I guess, called our ambassador in and said, "Can you get those chaps to fly for me when I'm in Bermuda?" Our ambassador in Washington took it to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State called the Chief of Naval Operations, and the Chief of Naval Operations said, "Oh, I'm sure they can do it." And I don't think he was thinking about, it's 700 miles off the coast is Bermuda, and the F-11 did not have long legs. The Navy had no in-flight fueling capability. The plane did, but the Navy didn't. Anyway, and it was in the middle of the week. Negotiations went back and forth, and my boss, 3-star Admiral Fitzhugh said, "Is there any way in the world you could do this and keep the schedule going?" And my thoughts, and I got together, and Kenny Wallace and I got our computers out and did our navigation. And if we take off from the Marine Corps Air Station at Beaufort, South Carolina, and expedite takeoff, we'll get there with about 25 minutes of fuel left. We can't get back. Okay, well, At that time, Bermuda was only they operated were patrol planes. They didn't have any jet fuel. They just had aviation gas for the patrol plane. So the skipper of the air station was notified he's going to have 6 F-11s in his front yard in a few days, and he was going to host the Queen of England. He was not too happy with the short notice of this, and he blamed it all on me later on. But we pulled it off. We got to Bermuda, landed, were able to refuel, flew an air show for the Queen right in front of her residence offshore. And that evening we had a nice reception with the Queen and Prince Charles. Took off Thursday morning, got back in our regular routine, flying weekend shows. But today I still get Christmas cards from the Queen. She personally thanked me for the trip, and she was a gracious lady, and it really helped with public relations, I think. Anyway, the rest of the year, we've ended up our season after Thanksgiving here in Pensacola, and we had invited the Thunderbirds to come in and join us, and the Canadian Snowbirds. So we had 3 teams here for my final show, and we flew the last show about 4 o'clock in the afternoon after the Thunderbirds and Snowbirds had flown. And I briefed my team. I said, all right, now guys, this is my last show, but it's nothing unusual. No closer, no farther out, just a regular show. Halfway through the first maneuver, my left and wingman were so close to me, I was almost out of control. And the slot man Kenny Wallace was, okay, you guys move out a little bit, you're pushing me out of formation. So then they did, they moved out to their normal routine, 15 inches. And we flew a good last show. And it was...
Now, Laura put in here to ask you about St. Patrick's Day and the green smoke.
That was in 1959. The mayor of Savannah, Georgia, called us, and they have a big St. Patrick's Day thing on March the 17th, and they wanted to know if I could come over and dye the river green, and because he knew we had colored, he thought it was smoke out the wingtips. It was actually jet fuel. We put food dye in, and we had red and blue from the wingtips and white smoke out the tail. And I told him, well, one thing, we don't do flybys. That was not in our agenda at the time. And he seemed to accept that. And he immediately called the governor of Georgia. The governor of Georgia called my boss. I said, the guy, this Commander Knott tells me that you can't do flybys. What's that all about? And my boss explained, no, they don't do flybys. They just do formal air shows with insurance and everything organized a year or 2 in advance. So the governor then called, I think, directly to the Chief of Naval Operations. And the Chief of Naval Operations came back to my boss, a 3-star, and said, get these guys to bend the rules and do this if you possibly can. Okay, we'll do it. But now where does the green dye come from? I didn't have any, I had a very limited budget, no money, and the dye cost about $500 for a 50-gallon barrel, and it was made by DuPont up in Delaware. They said, okay, we're going to do it. Now, how do I pay for this dye? Oh, that's your problem. Well, I don't have it. I'm not going to pay it out of my pocket. I'm a young commander making $300 a month. I called the vice president of Grumman Aircraft. I said, hey, can you guys help me with some dye? The president of Grumman called the president of DuPont in Delaware. How about some green food dye, 100 gallons? Oh, we can do that. So my maintenance officer, who also flew number 8, our Douglas transport, took off on like Tuesday morning, flew to Delaware, loaded 2 55-gallon drums of green food dye, brought it back to Pensacola. My kids cleaned the wings, washed out the tanks, and we loaded up with jet fuel and green food dye. Took off, went to Savannah, checked in the local control tower, and we would do a pass from west to east of the Savannah River and reverse out over the ocean and head home. Savannah control, we made our pass. He said, oh, that was just so great. Can you do it again on the way back out? And I had my computer on my knee pad. I looked at it, oh yeah, we can, all right, we'll reverse course and dye the river once again, headed west for home. And the wind had picked up, and the wind was from the north, and the Savannah River through there is east to west. So we had a pretty strong northerly wind from our right side as we flew up the river on the way home. And the dye just, there were hundreds of cars and people on the south side of the river, which is Savannah, watching the show, and we dyed them all green. I got back home, and the mayor of Savannah called and said, all the cars are green. What do we do? I said, wash them with fresh water. He said, that's going to cost us $5 a car. Well, I'm sorry, Mayor, I don't have any money to do that. And to tell the people that were standing outside just to wash their clothing in fresh water. It's not harmful. DuPont assured me it's not harmful. You could drink it if you wanted to. But the mayor came up, he approached the governor of Georgia. The governor of Georgia went to the senator, who was Russell from Georgia, and he got a House-approved bill to get federal money to wash all the cars in Savannah, Georgia. Later in that same year, we were en route from Seattle to Boston, and my en route, about 40,000 feet or so, my canopy cracked open, and we didn't wear pressure suits, but we did have oxygen anytime we flew above 15,000 feet. So I declared an emergency and landed at the Naval Air Station in Detroit. But to get down, we were heavy, had a lot of fuel, and I took my right wingman, Doug McCaughey, with me, and we were coming down with our speed brakes out, throttles way up, and then afterburner to burn down fuel so we could land on a 6,000-foot runway. But the afterburner and the high speed upset all the mink farms in the area, and the minks quit breeding. So the mink farmers sued me personally by name for millions of dollars. That was resolved by Navy lawyers and their lawyers, and eventually I was absolved of that. But there was two interesting things. But we did a full year, and in 1960 we went to Toronto for a big air show with the Canadian flight team, and the people up there were just absolutely great. It went off very well. We were received well and treated very, very nicely. It was a great trip.
Just to kind of finish up, I mean, that's just been awesome
Yeah.
listening to those. But what do you like for today's generation of blues and for people that are getting into it? I mean, what are your thoughts or anything you can say to the kids today?
I think, well, in my case, I was in high school right here in Pensacola, Florida, and we had, in our science classes, we had career naval officers, aviators from NAS Pensacola talk to the classes, and I was hooked at age 16 on becoming a Navy flyer. And then I think that's exactly what we need today. And the Flight Academy at Pensacola helps us get youngsters learning and thinking and wanting this tough life being a naval aviator. You're gone a lot, you're away from your home and family, and you're looking at the iron end of a big boat, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do. But I think right now, I live in Washington, and I'm aware of recruiting difficulties, but we're still able to get some really good young men out of ROTC, the Naval Academy, and other sources to fill up all our needs for Navy. In fact, I think right now there's an 18-month waiting list to come to Pensacola for flight training. And let's hope that continues.